The sunlight hit my apartment just right, casting golden streaks over the glass coffee table where my phone vibrated insistently. I felt the silk of my blouse brush against my skin as I reached for it, my nails faintly chipped from last night's rush. Each buzz made my chest tighten a little, not with excitement, but with the memory that always lingered, the words my father-in-law had thrown at me like a dagger years ago. Since you couldn't provide us with an heir, here, take this anniversary gift. I hadn't expected to think about him today, not with the way my life had taken off while the world assumed I was floundering. Yet here it was, a text from my brother-in-law, all casual emojis and half-smiles, asking if I'd attend the family gathering tonight. My hand hovered over the screen. Could I face them, knowing the truth of what I'd become? I let out a quiet laugh, bitter and soft, looking out at the city skyline from my floor-to-ceiling windows. Every successful step I'd taken since that humiliating moment had been private, small victories that no one at that dinner table would ever suspect. And yet, the anticipation of tonight's encounter stirred something almost playful in me. I smoothed the silk blouse over my shoulders one last time, feeling the weight of polished elegance and silent triumph. Tonight they would see me, not the version they dismissed as incomplete or less than, but the woman who had quietly rewritten her own story on her terms. I remember that evening with excruciating clarity, the way the chandelier cast fractured light across the dining room, highlighting every judgmental glance my father-in-law threw at me. I was 26, newly married, and still naive enough to think love and effort could bridge the gap between me and their expectations. He had leaned back in his chair, a smug smile on his face, and said the words I'd never forget. Since you couldn't provide us with an heir, here, take this anniversary gift. My hands had been trembling under the table, gripping the edge so tightly that my knuckles turned white. The gift, a delicate golden locket, felt like an insult wrapped in metallic mockery. Every nerve in my body screamed that I had failed, not in marriage, not in life, but in some cruel, unspoken standard set by a man who believed my worth was tied to something I couldn't control. Tears burned the back of my throat, but I forced them down. I had learned early in life that showing weakness was a luxury I couldn't afford, yet the sting of being dismissed so publicly pierced deeper than any reprimand ever could. My husband sat frozen, caught between his loyalty to his father and the embarrassment that filled the room. The silence pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. It was my grandmother's words that saved me, whispered in a memory that had become my secret mantra. A gift is only as valuable as the courage it inspires. Take it and make it your own. That night, I held the locket in my hands and made a silent vow. I would not let their judgment define me. I would not shrink or apologize for circumstances beyond my control. By the end of that week, I had begun charting my own course. Late nights researching opportunities, drafting plans for independence, and learning skills I'd been told I didn't need. Every small step a rebellion, every success a quiet victory. I didn't tell anyone, and I didn't need their approval. The humiliation of that dinner had sparked something powerful, the determination to build a life where my worth wasn't measured by someone else's expectations. I clenched the locket one last time before slipping it into my jewelry box. It was no longer an insult. It was a promise, a symbol of resilience that would carry me through every struggle, every doubt, every late night when the world seemed determined to remind me of my supposed limitations. The locket sat on my dresser like a quiet reminder every morning as I opened my laptop and dove into the work that would become my sanctuary. I had no grand inheritance, no safety net, just determination, a head full of ideas, and the stubborn refusal to let anyone else dictate my worth. The first months were brutal. I taught myself digital marketing late into the night, my apartment lit only by the soft glow of a desk lamp and the occasional flash of neon from the city outside. My fingers were raw from typing, my eyes heavy, but I refused to stop. It was during those nights that I met Ava Reynolds, a seasoned entrepreneur who had built a boutique consulting firm from scratch. Ava saw potential in me that no one else had, and she became both a mentor and a sounding board. Her voice was calm but commanding, full of warmth and sharp insight. "You're not failing," she told me once as I sat slouched in front of my laptop, exhausted. "You're just gathering ammunition. Your time to strike will come." I memorized that phrase, repeating it when self-doubt gnawed at the edges of my resolve. Every step forward was a battle. I faced clients who assumed I was inexperienced because of my age and appearance, colleagues who dismissed me in meetings, and the gnawing insecurity that maybe I wasn't capable. But I fought. I revised every proposal, polished every presentation, and celebrated each small win in silence. My first contract with a mid-sized tech company felt like scaling Everest. When I signed my first profitable deal, I allowed myself a quiet fist pump in my apartment before hiding the documents in a locked drawer. No one needed to know. Months turned into years. I moved from freelance projects to running my own boutique consultancy. I cultivated a niche, gained respect, and built a network of influential contacts. I invested in my apartment, filling it with art and furniture that spoke of refinement, taste, and ambition. Each purchase, each investment, each small victory was a secret rebellion against the narrative my father-in-law had tried to impose on me. Even my social media posts were carefully curated, modest updates that masked the scale of my achievements. Friends commented on my quiet success, never realizing the depth of strategy, late nights, and sacrifices behind every move. It was liberating, this hidden life where I could grow without interference, where I could take the sting of the past and turn it into fuel for the future. Every morning, I'd fasten the locket around my neck before stepping into the world. Not as a symbol of their judgment anymore, but as a talisman of my resilience. Every time I touched it, I reminded myself of the promise I had made all those years ago, to define my own worth on my own terms. The invitation had been polite, almost casual. "We'd love to see you at the anniversary dinner, Chloe. It's been too long." I smiled at the text, typing a short, neutral response. "I'll be there." No hint of the storm I carried quietly in my back pocket. The moment I arrived, I could feel the expectations pressing against me, as tangible as the crystal chandeliers overhead. The Whitmans had always assumed I'd come as the timid daughter-in-law, grateful for scraps of approval, my accomplishments non-existent in their eyes. But the apartment I rented nearby, my sanctuary, was nothing like the modest home they remembered. Every detail of tonight's dinner would reflect the life I had meticulously built in their absence. They greeted me with polite smiles and curious glances, eyes scanning for signs of struggle or weakness. I let them look. I let them absorb it. The confidence in my posture, the subtle shine of my designer heels, the soft gleam of the locket resting over my silk blouse. I took my seat with ease, placing my hand gently on the edge of the table, and let the moment stretch. Finally, my father-in-law's eyes locked with mine, the same ones that had delivered that cruel verdict years ago. He opened his mouth, then closed it, as if the words themselves refused to form. I sipped my wine slowly, savoring the pause, letting the weight of anticipation build. "When you gave me that gift," I began, my voice calm but firm, "you thought it defined me, that it was a judgment. But it became a symbol instead, a symbol of what I could achieve when no one believed I could." The room went quiet. My husband's hand trembled slightly as it hovered over his fork, and my brother-in-law's jaw tightened. I gestured lightly around the table, letting my eyes drift over the room I had carefully curated, the art, the subtle gold accents, the elegant organization of every piece of furniture, each hinting at sophistication, taste, and independence. I started from nothing. No inheritance, no guidance, no approval. I continued. But I had determination, and I had the courage to make my own way. I built a consulting firm, cultivated clients, and now I'm financially independent. Everything I own, everything I've created, it's mine. And no one's opinion has the power to diminish it. Their expressions shifted in real time. Disbelief, shame, awe. My father-in-law's hand twitched involuntarily, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. My husband's eyes glistened with pride and guilt, and my brother-in-law seemed stunned into silence. I leaned back slightly, letting the tension settle like dust in a sunbeam. "I am not the woman you assumed I would be," I said, my tone even but unyielding. "I am stronger, wiser, and independent. And I hope tonight you can see me, not the version shaped by your judgment, but the woman who turned it into power." The room remained still for a heartbeat, then slowly, like dawn breaking, realization dawned in their eyes. They weren't looking at the quiet, defeated Chloe of years past. They were meeting someone entirely new, someone who had thrived despite them, someone who had rewritten her story without their permission or their belief. And in that silence, I knew the balance had shifted. After the initial shock had settled, I leaned forward slightly, letting the subtle authority in my posture reinforce the words I was about to speak. The room was still charged with tension, expectation, fear, and curiosity blending into something almost palpable. I had the upper hand now, and I intended to use it wisely. "I've spent years building my life on my own terms," I said, keeping my voice calm but firm. "And I will not allow old patterns of judgment or entitlement to creep back in. If we are to move forward, it will be differently, on terms that respect my boundaries and acknowledge each of your responsibilities." I started with my father-in-law. "You taught me that my worth could be measured by someone else's expectations. That stops now. If you want a place in my life, you will treat me with respect, and you will address your comments with reflection, not criticism. You will attend therapy or counseling to confront the biases that caused you to belittle others." His face paled, but I held his gaze steadily. Turning to my husband, I softened my tone just slightly. "I need you to be my partner, fully and equally. That means acknowledging my accomplishments without resentment, supporting my goals, and never positioning me as secondary again. Anything less is unacceptable." His eyes glistened. I could feel the weight of past guilt pressing on him. My brother-in-law was next. "You will not assume my success diminishes yours. You have your own life to build, your own opportunities to seize. Stop comparing, stop criticizing, and start taking responsibility for your choices. That is your path to respect, not my downfall." Finally, I addressed the entire table. "We will rebuild our relationships on trust, accountability, and genuine effort. This is not about punishment, it's about growth. You each have the chance to redefine yourselves, to be better than the expectations that once trapped you. But understand this, I will not compromise my dignity or my independence to accommodate old habits." The room was silent, each person absorbing the weight of my words. I let it linger, letting the tension and the gravity of my authority sink in. Compassion was present, but it was tempered by the steel of someone who had endured humiliation, fought through doubt, and emerged victorious. For the first time, I felt the equilibrium shift. They weren't just seeing me, they were seeing the boundaries I had built, the respect I demanded, and the vision I had for all of us moving forward. The power dynamic had changed, and it was no longer dictated by past judgments or patriarchal expectations. I touched the locket resting over my blouse, a small, private reminder of how far I'd come. It was no longer a symbol of insult. It was the emblem of my authority, my resilience, and the uncompromising standards I set for myself and those around me. Weeks passed after that dinner, and slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the changes began. My father-in-law scheduled therapy sessions and approached our conversations with humility instead of judgment. My husband started listening more than he spoke, acknowledging my accomplishments with genuine pride rather than guilt. My brother-in-law took the advice to heart, pursuing his own goals without comparing them to mine, slowly shedding the envy that had once defined him. I watched these shifts with a quiet satisfaction, knowing the power of patience and consistent boundaries. The change wasn't instantaneous, but it was meaningful. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of their expectations lift, not because they had disappeared entirely, but because they had learned to meet me as I was, not as they wanted me to be. Every morning, I fastened the golden locket over my blouse, the piece of jewelry that had once been a cruel reminder of my inadequacy. Now it was a talisman, a symbol of resilience and transformation. I had carried it through years of struggle, late nights, and silent victories, and it now rested close to my heart as a reminder of the woman I had become. I reflected on the journey. Every whispered insult, every dismissive glance, every moment I had felt small. Those memories no longer carried pain, they carried power. They were proof of what I could endure and overcome. I had rebuilt not only my life, but also the relationships around me, transforming them into connections grounded in respect, honesty, and mutual growth. As I looked around my apartment, filled with the quiet beauty of my achievements, I smiled. The city outside glittered like a promise, each light a small affirmation that the future belonged to me. And in that moment, I realized that the only validation I had ever truly needed was my own. I touched the locket one last time, feeling the weight of years and the promise it held. My voice would carry this truth to anyone who had doubted me. I am not defined by the expectations of others. I am defined by the courage to rise, the strength to persist, and the grace to own my story, completely, unapologetically, and forever. And in that declaration, I felt complete.